Good evening. It's February 23rd, and we are discussing The Thread Collectors. It's a book that I really enjoyed. I am always excited to find different Jewish books from different eras. And of course, this is set in the Civil War. As always, I am going to share some pictures and then I'll read to you. And I also have a video, which I'll put in the chat. I heard a fascinating interview with both of them. And, I'm not going to listen to it tonight because we want to talk, but you all should definitely, if you, interested, you can go look. So this is Shaunna Edwards and Alyson Richman. And Shaunna's African-American and Alyson is Jewish. They were friends. And I can tell you a little bit more. So you see, oops. Redirect. Okay, I'm going to just stop that share there for a hot minute. And I'm going to read to you their biographies. So Shaunna has a BA in literature from Harvard and a JD from NYU School of Law. She's a former corporate lawyer and works in diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is a native Louisian, that makes sense, raised in New Orleans and currently lives in Harlem with her husband. This is her first novel. Now, Alyson, on the other hand, and let me just is an American writer, best known for The Lost Wife, a tale of a husband and wife who are separated in a concentration camp during World War II and reunite 60 years later. That's, she's Jewish and that's her, her background. She graduated from Wellesley College in 1994. We can do the math. And she currently lives with her husband and 2 children on Long Island. So I just want to talk a little bit about the video I saw. And again, I will put that in the chat. They were friends before, and then they decided to do this, and they went through each chapter and they would talk about what would happen in the chapter. And the thing that I found fascinating is when Alyson said, "Oh, I never thought about it that way." Or when Shaunna said, "Oh, I didn't realize." And I think that, Shaunna didn't realize how the Jews were considered outsiders. There was a pecking order and the Jews were at the bottom and then the blacks. And I think Shaunna made Alyson see that, they fought back to the best of their ability, not unlike, when people say, "Why didn't you fight back during the Holocaust?" And I think that both of them were able to give insights to the different characters. And I certainly appreciate it, and we'll talk about that in a hot minute. But because sometimes I think, if you write a book about what how would Alyson know about a Black slave? And how would Shaunna know about a Jewish, guy who's down there? And I think in Alyson's family, they had 2 brothers who fought on both sides of the war. And that was not uncommon. There were many people, obviously a lot of Jews lived up north, but the Jews who lived south, some of them were wealthy. And if you were wealthy, you owned slaves, you were on a plantation, you wanted the status quo. And in fact, I visited, there's a beautiful synagogue in Louisiana, and I visited there. And, one of the founders, he became senator. He was a Toro. Now, Judah Toro. Now, there's also the Toro Synagogue in Rhode Island, which was the first synagogue that George Washington said should be protected. So I think that they brought it's not a true story, but they brought elements of truth to both of these stories, which I think just made it so beautiful. So you can either raise your hand, or I muted you because somebody's given us an echo, but unmute and tell me what you thought of the book. Paula.
I thought it was an exceptionally beautiful story. And I thought that what they brought, I don't always like to read about the authors before I read something. I like to read it first and then learn about them. But the fact that they serendipitously met one another, had this history, and was able to put it, they were able to put this so beautifully together and reveal so many elements of what this country went through and is still going through. I thought it was a phenomenal book. It made me cry in many parts.
Yeah. 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 The helplessness
Mhm.
of the helplessness of all of the Blacks, the Jews. I mean, it's very frustrating. And I think as modern women sitting in 2023, it's, it's hard, you want them to rebel, you want them to fight back, and probably what they did was the best for them. Marilyn, you
Yeah, I waved.
right. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Well, I also enjoyed the book very much. And like I said earlier, I just finished it tonight when I came home from my mahjong game. And that's very important, girls. I have to have my mahjong.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. 3 times a week. That's my job. Anyway, the end of the book, I mean, Paul, I agree with you. I got very teary-eyed when Lily and Jacob came back to William and Stella. That, oh my God, that was so heartwarming. And the fact that she was actually able to find him, because I was worried about that, that really bothered me. Are we going to be able to get back to Jacob? And I just thought it was very well written, and I learned a lot. I mean, we all know stuff about the Civil War and how Blacks were treated, but this really gave you a very personal perspective, which I really enjoyed and learned a lot. So I love the book.
Gail, did you want to say something?
Oh, I'm just shaking my head in agreement.
Okay.
Yes, that I there was more about learning about how the Blacks were treated. I really didn't know as much as the book told me. I always felt that the book ending would be what it was, because as soon as William made his map, then it all brought everything together. I said, well, he's going to go back. Stella's going to make a map. Lily's going to get it. How that came about, a little contrived, but I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
I would love to see it as a made for TV movie, or like a 3-night series. I would just
agreed.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I would love it.
Yeah.
Okay, Leanne.
I loved the relationships in this book. I think the relationship with, and I read it so long ago, I have notes here, was it Jacob and Teddy? Just was so heartwarming.
Yeah.
And that's what stuck in my mind. And also, I think the discrepancies, one thing that I can't get out of my mind is there was this part in the book when, was it Lily? Lily's father was, they obviously had money, right? And he said to her, go tell the cook to make us a steak for dinner. And it just went right through my heart, that just the difference in terms of, everybody was struggling, but to make a statement like that, and then to know how other people couldn't, pull a turnip out of the ground. That really got to me.
You have to give Lily credit for being an abolitionist.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
She had every comfort known to man and beast, and she was singularly focused
Yes.
Not unlike Roberta's sister who just passed away, but I mean, she took up the cause and she didn't have to.
Yeah.
And that there's something to be said about that, certainly. Paula.
I love Lily's self-awareness that after she visited the hospitals, she realized that, making bandages and rolling bandages and it all came to her that this suffering is something that she had, in spite of her good efforts to try to do good and help, had no idea what suffering was until she visited that.
Yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, all the work that they were doing with the
was good
bandages
work.
and the quilting.
It was good work.
When you get there and you look at the way the people are suffering, dying, limbs all over the place, you walk in one room and they're full of the arms and legs that had to be, and then she looks at her little bandages and her quilts. And what
Right.
does that mean? What does it really do?
Right. I also thought it was absolutely fascinating, and people, and I'm watching Jessie as she's knitting this evening, that what a big part sewing was for both of them.
Yeah.
And my sister-in-law makes quilts, and I said, you have to read this. And Debbie Harris, who's very crafty, I said, you should read this, because I think that that's an integral part of the book, that
Yes.
they were both, and that's the maps
Mhm.
was ingenious.
Yeah.
Absolutely ingenious. Yeah, Roberta, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Thought the relationship between Stella and her sister and the mother and the
Beautiful.
slave owner. The slave owner was such a hideous human being.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't know about those things, but somehow it seemed as though you were I don't know, privy to things that this is kind of like the whole controversy about, do we teach our history or do we not?
Yeah,
I mean,
we teach it.
because even things that we've
Right.
been taught that are hard to accept, it's sugar coated compared to what really happened.
Exactly. Phyllis, and I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Phyllis.
Thank you. I have to agree with that so much. I think that we all know about the Civil War and the slaves and what we got in school and what we've learned since, but it was what was done to women was exposed in a way that I never, I thought, slaves did all the hard labor, blah, blah, blah. But oh my God, what Fry did was horrendous.
The marketplace, when those young, women who were biracial are being paraded, and what her mother told her, and how Stella's sister, Amine, was like a field hand and, wasn't raised with them for part of her life. And how much is based on looks? How much is based on their looks? Roberta and then Paula.
I thought, when William is looking for his friend and his clothes are tattered and he has this very primitive map that he made, and they all just dismiss him, and they and they use the N-word. I mean, and these are people that are the Union Army. They're the same army that he served in, and they just dismissed him like he had no value.
Well, he wasn't wearing his uniform, and that's why. But who knows?
Yeah, but the
when they
human
came upon him.
condition, the fact that human beings
Yeah.
do this and still do it today
And
is
still do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Leanne, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Dismissed is one thing, but use those Black soldiers as human targets. I mean, that they
Right.
just literally forced them to go ahead and they knew they were going to be shot.
Yeah.
I think you get a real good sense of the reality at that time. But to me, it's impossible for us to really have that experience, to
Agreed.
know what they were going through.
Well,
It's
Paula,
absolutely
and then
impossible.
Elaine, then Phyllis.
Yeah,
Well, I find it so incongruous that white men like Fry could have such loathing for Black people and yet have a sexual relationship and find them desirable. It's so contradictory in my mind that you could consider somebody subhuman, but it's the power. You know, rape is always about power, not necessarily about sex. But that whole culture is something that is so difficult to wrap your head around as a modern woman.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Elaine.
Yeah, using the Black Regiment as a target really brought me to thinking about the movie Glory, where with Matthew Broderick and
Right.
Denzel Washington, and that's exactly like one of the first Black regiments of the Civil War from Massachusetts, and they also were used as targets because that movie is based on a true story. But
You're absolutely right.
I love the suspense in this story. It really drew me in, and it kept me reading, and I really read through it very fast. And I thought it did an excellent job of illustrating the time and the conditions of everyone.
I don't think they were
Can I
targets. They were just
interject
sent out
something?
before the white soldiers. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty much what they said. They sent the Black troops in first and they got decimated, and then the white troops went in.
Yeah. Okay. I have Phyllis, Paula, Roberta.
The
Yeah.
the Blacks were not people. They were objects.
Right.
They were bought and sold. They were marketable.
Belongings.
That's exactly it. They were not to
Chattel.
send them in first didn't matter. To rape them and ruin them, that didn't matter because these were not people. I hate to say it, but parts of that reminded me of the Holocaust and Jews.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Same thing.
I
Agreed.
mean,
Agreed.
yeah, I mean, and the other thing I have to say is there's a piece about music
Yes.
that's very important in the story. It's what brings the Black and the Jew together. And it kind of, it's like the map. They followed the music. They followed, Jacob and William clung to each other, but all through music.
Yeah.
It was the flute and
Yeah. And you wanted to hear him. Such a prodigy is that. To hear, I was telling Arthur the story, and he's like, "Well, how did he learn Mozart and Bach?" I said he could he heard it and repeat it. I mean, that is that's a prodigy.
Right.
Yeah. Roberta.
I think Paula was first,
Oh, Paula.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's also very masterful that you didn't know which author was writing, even after you knew there were two authors. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, I don't know if any of you have read any of the Killerman books. You don't know if Sally's writing or Jonathan's writing. And then sometimes you get to a paragraph and you say, oh, he must have asked her to help with this. It's not his style. Like he got stuck on a plot point. But I thought this was extremely smooth.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Agreed. I don't know if they could do other books, but I would read another book by the two of them in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Roberta.
I thought that the sister-in-law was a very interesting character.
Oh,
Wait,
yeah.
which sister-in-law? The
Lily's sister-in-law.
oh yeah.
Is a Southern woman, and she's not likable, but she softens because as they spend time together searching for Jacob,
Yeah.
But you know, what struck me was, if you, let's see if this makes sense. If God forbid any of us had parents that were members of the Ku Klux Klan, and you grew up in a family that held those beliefs, you would believe them too. I used to tell this to my students all the time because they'd be so liberal about things, but because I taught in Oak Park. And so, and I consider myself liberal, but that's because I'm surrounded by and live in a community and our synagogue and so many things that encourage open thinking and acceptance. And so I thought the sister-in-law was an interesting character because she was a product of the setting, the region.
Yeah.
And, you know, when Lily went back and her letter had not arrived, so both Jacob's brother and his wife didn't expect to see her. The brother had softened, he had lost the leg, he had, you know, and he was concerned about his brother's safety. And
Yeah.
it took, and I don't know, I just think it's so easy to judge. I mean, I didn't like her, and the woman, I didn't get to the end of the book yet, so I have about 40 more pages. But the woman,
Those are the best pages.
well, I'll get, I mean, I know what happened now, but when Jacob shows up at her door with William, and she dismisses William, and all of a sudden she thinks that Jacob is her son. And I'm just curious about how, I mean, you can tell me, I'm going to read it tonight anyway, but
You'll
I
love
thought
it.
the way she spoke to William, the way, and you're right, Leanne, it's so much greater than dismissive. It's, I don't even know the word for it, but I mean, William's trying to explain what happened, and she won't have any of it.
Right. The sad thing is, and I have a quick, a sad anecdote. The Board of Jewish Education used to send educators. We went to some universities to study. And one year they sent us to the South and we taught. And we were in Jackson, Mississippi. And I went to Vicksburg. And the synagogue was literally, the people were dying. What did they want to study? Kaddish. Anyway, we had a black bus driver and they had dinner for us. And so, the Northerners were like, to the bus driver, come and eat with us. And so he came in, and when our hosts finally kind of got down, because it was in the basement of the synagogue or whatever, and they said, oh, he'll feel more comfortable in the kitchen with their black help. And that was in the 2000s.
Oh,
So, and we were guests. And the one Israeli on the trip she said, I thought we were going to have to sedate her, but I will never, ever forget this. We were shocked, absolutely shocked. And so here, I mean, we were reading about this, and it's not a true story, but it was over 100 years ago, and I think that still happens. I know it still happens.
Sure.
And so I thought that it gave it, that full flavor of reality. Leanne. Wait, and go.
I think one other thing we need to remember, and Jacob was the one that pointed this out, he hid his Jewishness from the other men in his company.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
tell them. And you know what? He didn't have to tell them. He was a white Union soldier.
Mhm.
William could not hide his ethnicity.
Right.
And that, I think, also plays into this story. In terms of what you choose to keep to yourself and how you can possibly live your life or help yourself, and how you cannot.
I have
That's
a
a great
question. I have a question for you. See if anyone, the authors have capitalized both black and white in the novel. Did you notice this? Did you ever ponder why white is not traditionally capitalized, but black is?
Yes.
Yeah, I read that too in the back of the book, and I don't
Right.
think.
How has this change affected how you perceive descriptions of race in the written word?
I don't know if I really noticed that. The capitalization, you know?
I listened to part of the book and I didn't. And I have it on Kindle and I'm going to look it up, but any thoughts on that? Phyllis and then Leanne.
I think we're desensitized. And surely, I mean, I don't see it a whole lot different today. The policemen that are murdering Black young people, they're objects, and they're not subjects, they're objects. And I think white is considered the norm. Black is the exception, and there is no inclusion.
Yeah. I forget, Jesse. Then Leanne. Sorry, Leanne.
To add on to, I think, to what Phyllis is trying to say, it reminds me the effort to make them both capitalized, I think, brings parity to it. Whereas like today, does it not drive you crazy when someone will be describing a situation and they'll throw in something like, oh, the Chinese woman or the Hispanic boy or the gay man or the lesbian woman? It's like, those are, we don't need to put those descriptors in there because they don't add anything to the story, but because they're different than you, you feel the need to do that. And it's,
yeah. Every time my mother goes to the doctor, and she's had to see a lot of doctors, she goes, what do you think they are? She'll say to me. I go, American. And then she'll go, but where do you think they're from? America. They probably were born here,
Crystal
Mom.
Lake. They're from Crystal Lake.
Well, we go in a lot of other places besides Crystal Lake, but she is perturbed with me when I say that. Leanne.
Yeah.
No, I agree with Phyllis. I think it's about whiteness. We don't even see it as a race. It's what the world is. So if somebody says, what's your race? And you're white, you start thinking, what's my race, right?
But do you think the author did that on purpose and capitalized it so we would think that and
yeah, I think that's the difference. I think that's the difference.
Yes.
Talk about white privilege, talk about, like Phyllis said, white is the norm and anything else can be identified as something else. Yeah.
Vanessa?
Yes. Marilyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I found something in the book. I was looking for the capitalization.
Oh, good.
Okay. And when William brought Jacob to that cabin, okay, with the woman.
Oh my God.
He says, William said in a servile tone, lowering his gaze so as not to be caught looking at a capitalized white woman in the eye. So here it is.
Yeah. That was a scary,
Oh yeah.
very scary. I thought very realistic with, the crazy, and she thought that Jacob was her son. And that was, yeah. And
at least she took care of him.
Yeah.
At least she took care of him. So that was something.
Yeah. It was, yeah. William's musical skills allow him more freedom than other enslaved men, which eventually leads to his relationship with Stella and his escape. However, his uniqueness does not shield him from the horrors that befall the Black soldiers at Port Hudson. For members of marginalized groups, what impact does individual talent have or not have in improving one's circumstances?
Well, it marks you as a special person in some way. You've got a special talent that puts you above everybody else, whether in his case, because he was a Black man, he had something that the others did not have, but he still had to go and help dig ditches. Okay, so.
Right. But they noticed him right away. He was skinny. He had no calluses.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice clothes on.
Nice clothes on, yeah. They could tell right away that, and I think that living, up in the big house or being a field hand was a huge, difference in your life. And so there, that would have helped. I guess and sometimes it helped, but if you were a beautiful woman and then the white master raped you,
It sets you apart from the rest.
Yeah. And there's a question about Amine. The sisterhood between Stella and Amine plays an important role in the novel. How does the unequal nature of the sisters' circumstances affect their relationship?
In some ways, it made them more devoted to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, didn't Amine act as her mother at many a time where Janie really
Yep.
wasn't around, so that she became very dependent with Amine.
And Amine, did have someone she loved. And Stella eventually had William, but she had this relationship with Fry forced upon her. And then how about when when he dies at the end, you just want him to.
Oh yeah, that was great.
And they didn't tell
Right.
anybody that they killed him. That was their
I love
secret.
that. That was wonderful.
Great.
Yeah,
That was the sister secret.
yeah.
Yeah.
He got what was coming.
Oh, absolutely.
I just finished. Wait, I have to look. I had to write it down. The chemistry lessons.
Yes.
Oh, lessons in chemistry.
Lessons in chemistry. I can
Yeah,
never.
yeah. Yeah.
Loved it.
And
She's
what
speaking this Sunday.
Yeah, I know. I might go. What I can't get over, I'm not gonna, if you haven't read it, I think it's one of the best books I've read this year. And it takes place in the late 50s and 60s. And all I'm going to say is that rape occurs in that book more often than you would think. And, again, 100 years later, and these were white women are getting raped, and Paula, you just said it, that rape is about power.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this book, lesson, it makes me think and think and think because, I was born in 1959. Like this is what's still going on. And we, in 2023, we're in a little bit of a different place, but not totally and entirely.
No.
How does the relationship between Stella and Amine change over the course of the story?
Well,
Go ahead,
by,
Phyllis.
by the end, it's almost a role reversal when Amine gets sick. I mean, she was always the one that had, more influence or, did the guiding, but at the end it was totally different. I have to say this, I think the role of women's relationship is very important to this book. The power of women when they're united. When you think about what they accomplished.
Yeah.
The other women in their Rampart Street, how they all eventually came together for each other. That was beautiful. That was really something. And in the beginning, a couple of them weren't so keen on getting involved, but Stella got to them. Okay. And then they all rallied together.
And I'm sure, again, that that's based on history, but I had no idea that you knew that they were being raped, but I didn't know that, the Confederate, these white men had a whole neighborhood full of women, mistresses.
Yeah.
Mistresses.
Yeah. That was
All went through
amazing
the
to
same
me.
thing. Oh, God.
Yeah.
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 And her
What-
fear, her
What
fear,
do you-
her fear of having a lighter skinned baby, or having a dark baby was almost paralyzing to her.
Yes.
Paralyzing to me. I was so worried.
We all were worried.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what
And,
do you think?
and now we know the genetics, you can have, a black member of your family and have a light skinned baby or a dark skinned baby generations later, even.
Oh,
And it doesn't
absolutely.
necessarily
Yes.
mean at the next generation is going to determine who the parentage is
Right.
by visually, by seeing the child.
Yeah.
But they were very primitive.
At Port Hudson, the Black Soldiers sing Amazing Grace, a hymn originally written by John Newton, an 18th century slave trader. While he underwent a spiritual conversion, he continued in the slave trade for some time. I always thought it was a Christian hymn. I didn't realize that the author was a slave trader. Can you separate the present beauty of art from the past sins of the artist? And can you think of modern examples of this dilemma?
Hmm.
Yeah, I can think of a million.
Michael
Paula,
Jackson,
Michael Jackson,
his work, his work
Yep.
and his art was fabulous.
right?
But
Woody Allen,
Woody Allen.
Philip Roth. I mean, we could have a full hour on artists. R. Kelly, who was just sentenced to 30 years.
Harvey Weinstein.
Who?
Harvey Weinstein.
Oh God, yeah, Harvey
Yeah.
Weinstein, yeah. And sometimes
Donald Trump.
Well,
There is no art.
yeah.
There's no art there.
That is very true.
Harvey Weinstein just got 60 years in prison for his wonderful life attributes in the world. I heard he got 60 years.
Yeah.
Who did? Marilyn, who did? Who got
R.
60?
Kelly.
Harvey Weinstein
Oh, R.
Oh,
Kelly.
Harvey Weinstein, yeah.
deservedly so.
I saw Woody Allen's Manhattan was on, and I was watching it, and it, I'm sure it's, modeled on his own life but he plays this person who falls in love with a kid in high school. And you couldn't make that movie today, nor
No.
should you, but I was creeped out. I was just creeped out by the whole thing. And I think sometimes, there is a Jewish composer, Karl Bach. And the minute he died, all these women came out and said he had had inappropriate relations with him. And some people banned his music. I'm not that well versed in it, but it's stuff that that we do. It's very popular. So it crosses all borders. And yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why do you think Teddy was in the book?
Well, good question.
Anybody got any answers? I haven't figured it out.
Leanne.
I think Teddy was in the book. One of the reasons maybe was to educate Jacob. Jacob had no idea of Teddy's background. It was also, like I said before, truly a love story. He was his son.
You mean William?
William.
But I mean, in terms of Teddy, and you said how important music was in this book. And Teddy just, fulfilled that aspect too, in terms of his giftedness with his drumming.
I
don't know.
think too that
Innocence.
Teddy's story, his parents were wealthy or at least comfortable, and these white men were so resentful that this black couple lived a better life than them, that's why they came in and ravaged and killed both the parents.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
I
and
I
can't
agree. I
finish my
think
sentence.
that's why his story was there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, Sandy, I'm gonna unmute you.
Thought it was really important, Teddy's role, because it brought in what happened to the children. That the children were affected by all the things that happened. And that was the message. That's why the authors, I felt, brought Teddy's in. And it was really heartbreaking.
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
it was very poignant, very, very, very poignant. And it's something that a lot different scenes stick with different people, but everybody remembers that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe Teddy was in there too to illustrate that not everything turns out happy and that there was a lot of loss.
Oh, yes, agreed. I mean, really, we lost the most men in the Civil War. If you ever look at statistics, it's more than all the wars put together. And of course, they were all Americans.
810,000 men were killed in the Civil War. I read it at the end of the book. More than any other war, 810,000, and 8,000 Jewish men
Yes.
were at part of the Civil War.
And they also go into the Jewish part. They don't mention, but Lincoln is the first one who appoints Jewish chaplains. And Grant, of course, was a rabid, well-known anti-Semite. And they do talk a little bit about that in the book. And, you know, he had to retract stuff. But that was definitely, and the people in Vicksburg, where I went to go visit, you know, they were very proud of their relatives who had fought in the Civil War, and some of them were Jewish. You know, on the side of the South.
Wait.
Yeah,
We
Jesse.
went to a wedding a couple of years ago. Joel has a biological niece, and we went to her wedding, and it was in Virginia. And it's the first time I've ever seen a Confederate flag flying by the side of the highway. And we took a tour. We were in Leesburg, I think. And we took a tour around the historic town, and we went into the visitor center, and the woman behind the desk was from Boston. And we said something about the Civil War, and she starts winking at us and says, "Oh, you mean the War of Northern Aggression? That is what we call it." Wink, wink. It's like I had never heard that phrase.
The war between the states.
Yeah, but the War of Northern Aggression, I thought I've not heard that one before.
Jesse, I love your cat.
Thank you.
I'm a cat person. Have her face the camera. Let me see her.
We were in
Oh, she's beautiful.
we were
Thank you.
in Richmond in a Civil War museum, and you know, seeing what they put up in a museum in the South is, you know, very, very frightening. And we were there, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, but a lot of Confederate flags.
Yeah.
Even we would go from Washington, D.C. to the beach in Rehoboth in Delaware.
Yeah.
And in those rural areas, it's, you know, there was a fruit stand and it had, you know, Confederate flag and Trump flags. And it's an uncomfortable feeling. You know, you're like, this isn't home. And Roberta, you said, you know, we live in a bubble. And Illinois, for me, you know, is the best bubble. You know, we have Democratic senators, we have a Democratic congressman, we have, you know, there's just something. We're in a bubble here, and when you get outside that bubble, it's just I'm finding yes, man.
Governor too.
Yeah.
So
Jacob and William find themselves forging a strong friendship against the backdrop of war, despite coming from completely different backgrounds. What do you think draws them together? How does music and outsidership play into this novel? Is there an unusual friendship that you have forged?
Well, music brought them together for sure.
For sure.
because William was so very talented.
Yeah.
And he could see this, and it really, really got to him. And that's why he started giving him the music that his wife was sending to him. I thought it was a beautiful friendship. I really did.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
And
The way the question is written, Phyllis, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think that they were both outsiders within them. They both felt they were outsiders.
Mhm.
They were not part of the norm. And I think, spoken or unspoken, they both picked up on that. You know, it was the music that brought them together for sure. But
Mhm.
both of them to the places that they called home, to the rest of the world, they were outsiders.
Mhm.
Because
Go ahead,
Well,
Roberta.
What I was going to say, though, is the question itself answers itself. The
Yeah.
question tells you
Yeah,
music
right.
and being outsiders, and then it
Yes.
asks you, you know, what pulls them together. But I mean,
That's it.
that's it. And if they had not both been musicians, they probably wouldn't have found one another.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree there. Yeah.
What about unusual friendships?
Can I say one other thing? I
Sure.
think the number of times, there's 2 or 3 times, 2 for sure, where Jacob says Kaddish, and William asks him after Teddy has died to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's something, there's a spirit between them too. A
Mhm.
spirit, I don't know if it's spirituality, but there's something. I was really moved when William starts to, he doesn't know the prayer, but
Right.
he says, yes, I think he says something like Yiska something, or
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and he's trying to
Yeah.
remind Jacob of the prayer for the dead.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
That,
it was very
again,
touching.
another very poignant,
Yeah, very
you know,
touching, very
very
touching.
touching when Teddy dies.
Yeah.
And what was beautiful about that was that it was 2 separate races.
Mhm.
William was asking Jacob to do the Jewish thing,
Yeah.
or who wasn't Jewish. It
Yeah.
was,
Yeah. You know, sometimes well, I can give you, we want to do a Juneteenth Seder at Macomb.
Hmm.
And we want to put, you know, like a Jewish spin on it. And, you know, we keep talking about, and Rabbi Sarada is, you know, 100% behind it. But we both, he and I, we can't do this till we have a partner. Can't have a white Juneteenth Seder with a bunch of Jewish people. And, you know, I so admire my daughter Lital. She works in Washington, D.C. She lives in a very mixed neighborhood. She's one of the only white, you know, staff at her school, and she has friends who are Black. And, you know, I have some colleagues who are Black, but, you know, I think about how do you forge those friendships? And of course, because I'm a professional Jew, unless I find another Jew of color, and actually I do have a couple friends who are Jews of color, but you know.
But you wouldn't have met them if it wasn't for your profession, right?
Right, and Lital wouldn't have met them if it wasn't for her profession.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
sometimes I think, though, the next generation doesn't see the color as much as we do. We were
Oh,
born of a different generation, and
Yeah.
they can forge, you know, I know with my grandchildren, you never ever say that you thought somebody was heavy or that somebody is gay. It's like was said before, I can't remember which of you said it, but it's perceived totally different by the next generation, and you
Yeah.
just leave it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Although, two things. I'm going to put in the chat now. This is the 30-minute interview. And at one point in the interview, and I'll send it out in the email tomorrow.
I
To
knew
remind
that.
myself to do that.
Oh,
Just
good.
to
Okay.
copy.
Right. Alyson had said to Shaunna, I grew up colorblind. And Shaunna says, no, I don't want you to be colorblind.
Right.
I'm Black. And I thought, I thought that line there is worth watching the whole interview. Leanne, did you have a question?
No, I was gonna say that. I said,
Richman.
people of color don't want us to say we don't see color.
Right.
We have to recognize color, but I think what you're saying is this generation just has a different view, a healthier acceptance.
Right.
Another thing I was going to say, and I've been thinking about this, I think Jacob was so sensitive, so vulnerable, so perceptive, so desperate for a relationship with his brother again, that I believe, even if he wasn't a musician, he still would have forged an extremely close bond with William. I think when he first met him and he first saw him and he first laid eyes on him, he was drawn to him. He knew there was something different and exceptional about him. I mean, it was beautiful that music brought them together. But I just think that that's the type of person Jacob was. And he desperately needed that relationship. So yeah, it was based on music and other things, but it was something that I think Jacob would have forged regardless.
Yeah. And of
Yeah.
course, at that point, the relationship with his brother was kind of rocky, and
Right.
that was. Merle, you haven't said anything. Anything you want to add? Wait,
Who, me?
no,
Who?
Merle. Marilyn, you've added, and it's great.
Okay, I'm done adding.
I'm so sorry I was late. My daughter unexpectedly dropped by for dinner. That was why I was so late. The thing I really wanted to say is that in my family, there are professional musicians. I have a daughter who is an opera singer. I have another daughter who writes music for television and film in Los Angeles. And music is such a huge part of our life. I was thinking about how Willie, with his brilliance, was treated as a, quote, circus monkey.
Yes.
Until he was able to meet people like Jacob who appreciated his music. And I learned something from this book about the city of New York. I had no idea that during the Civil War, there were so many people in New York who were fighting the Black people who happened to be up in New York, who had escaped the South. I had no idea. I thought she really brought a lot of history to people who otherwise would not have known it. That was a really good book.
Thank you. Yeah, agreed. All right, we're coming to the end here, and I want to get the next book. So the next book, and Elaine and I have read it, and we really like it. No, that's not it. Where is it? There it is. It's called The Matchmaker's Gift. And it's we have read The Two-Family House by Linda Cohn Leugman. And if you haven't read that, that's a great book. I thought it was a great book, and it gave us a lot to talk about. And I think that this is going to give us a lot to talk about here. There's some romance, there's some historical fiction. It's a split screen from the 1900s to 1994, I think.
And
So,
it's going to make you want to bake babka.
oh yeah, yes, yes, or
That
have a
would be like,
pickle.
if we ever got back to meeting in person,
Yeah,
that would be what you'd have to bring is babka.
yes, a babka. You are correct. You are absolutely correct. Yeah. I was just reading something else that made me hungry. There's sometimes these books, they start talking about things. And this is on the
I
lower.
haven't eaten dinner yet.
Oh.
No more food. Dinner comes after, because it's only It's on 7 o'clock here.
Yes, all right, so it's a little earlier there. I do want to put a plug in for two more things. Sunday morning is David Barak Gordensky, and he's at UFC. He's a professor. He's going to talk about he's going to talk about Reform Zionism in Israel, and I have to find his picture. Listen, you should just come. He is super handsome. That's he is. Wait,
Way to sell it, Vanessa.
wait. I'm going to show
But
you.
is he interesting or? do
He's
we just
very.
look?
Listen, he is very interesting.
I'm sure he is.
Look how cute he is.
Oh,
Come on.
nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
At least one with you. Where's all the pictures?
Yeah. So
Okay.
also March 4th is our annual Porm Spiel, and we're back in person, Fiddler on Vermouth. And you need to make a reservation by Monday. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's not dinner, but heavy appetizers. Good. I found savory Hamantaschen.
Ah,
Oh,
my daughter explained Purim to her fiance, who is not Jewish, as saying it's Jewish Halloween.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's good.
So
Very
anyway,
clever.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we have we have another with Roberta Qual on March 5th. But anyway, watch all your McCombs at home. It's great seeing everyone. Oh, and I showed you what the book was, right? Yes.
Yeah, what
Didn't
do we
pick a
do?
date.
We
You
need
didn't pick a date.
A date. Oh, Roberta, you're keeping me on the. Okay,
your
let's take a
toes.
look. So March. March 23rd. I could do March 23rd.
That's what I was looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I'm shockingly not out of town that day.
Good.
I have a really bad March.
Yeah.
We have plans already for that day, but,
Oh,
well, people are coming from California to Arizona to visit us. And
Oh.
that's one of the days, so I'll still read the book regardless of whether.
it's a fun, Gail, you're gonna like it. And
I
I
love
take
most of
this.
the book to say anyway. Oh,
Thank
do we
you.
have 2 seconds for me to tell a grandchild story about?
Sure.
color? Well, my granddaughter, when she was about 5 or 6, was a swimmer, and I brought a picture of my father, who was on the Inglewood High School swim team, to show her about how cute these boys were. And the thing she said to me and it's a black and white picture, and she said, they're all the same. And I said, well, when you're on a swim team, you wear uniforms so that you are all the same. And my daughter said to me, that's not what she's talking about. She's talking about all the faces are white.
Oh,
In her school, they are very diverse. She goes to a private school out in DC. And like your daughter, my daughter thinks that diversity is the way to go. And
Yeah.
so her friends are of many colors, many names, many backgrounds. She knows she's Jewish, but it doesn't impact who she's friendly with.
yeah. Well, that's a really good story to end on. They're all the same. We'll remember that. It's good seeing everyone. If there's anything I can do for you, come after me, and have a good month. You're going to love the Matchmaker's Gift.
Can't
Thank
wait
you.
to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well, everyone.
Bye.